Well, what an exciting evening we have here. I've had the privilege of spending some time with our guest tonight as a result of meeting him with Congressman Scott Perry when he came to town. And it was an interesting meeting. One of the things that Trey Gowdy told me is that when it comes to military, he goes directly to Scott Perry for issues. And tonight, when I first saw the congressman, he said, I saw the general. And I always appreciate the fact that he calls Scott the general, because I think of him more as a general than I do a member of Congress as well. Our guest tonight hails from South Carolina. He is a dad. He is a family man, a man of God, federal prosecutor, member of Congress, a Fox commentator. He has Sunday Night with Trey Gowdy. He has spent time touring the country and talking about great conservative causes, and boy, has he come to the right place, right? Please welcome Congressman Trey Gowdy.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Thank you all. If I said I went to Scott Perry for military advice, then I misspoke. I go to his chief of staff, Lauren, who, if I'm not mistaken, still wears the uniform. I think she may still be in the reserves, or maybe I'm wrong. I know Scott got on out of here. He's heard this speech before, and he said he wasn't going to stick around. So I loved seeing him. I loved serving with him. Yes, I went to him for military advice, but that's not it. He's a hard worker, and his staff works so hard. And I may have other former colleagues here as well, and I don't mean to give them short shrift, but I really enjoyed serving with Scott Perry, and I really enjoyed bumping into he and Lauren and watching them fight. I got 3 sisters, so it kind of reminded me of being at home. I also want to thank the Pennsylvania Leadership Council. I really want to thank the first 8 people that you invited that couldn't make it, and I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that they could not, and I am thrilled to be here. And for your warmth and hospitality, I met a number of you in the photo line. And what I'd like to do, I want to talk about how we can build something sustainable, how we can build a movement that lasts, that is not subject to the vagaries of election cycles. That's what I want to talk about. But so many of you in the photo line asked for updates on my family and what it's like to be out of politics. If you will indulge me, I'll just give you a quick little update on my wife and kids and what life in South Carolina is like, and then we'll talk about how to win and how to win over the long haul. Our daughter just finished law school, because if there's anything the world needs more of, it is lawyers. I guess it was around Thanksgiving, she called and said, you know, daughters never stop being your daughter. Doesn't matter how old they are. She's 25, but she still says, Daddy, I think I lost my debit card. I either lost it or it was stolen. I said, sweetheart, those are 2 very, very different things. I mean, can we kind of narrow it down? Did you lose it or was it stolen? Well, I don't know. So I had this great idea, because I used to be a prosecutor. I said, I'm going to go online and I'm going to kind of monitor your bank activity. I'm going to see whether or not your debit card is being used outside of Columbia, South Carolina. And my wife was looking over my shoulder. This would have been the day after Thanksgiving. Looking over my shoulder, and sure enough, you can see that debit card being used in South Columbia. You can see it being used in Aiken. You can see it being used in Augusta, Georgia, and then all the way into Northwest Florida. And my wife said, well, that settles it. Somebody's got Abigail's debit card. I'm going to go call the police, and you call the bank. I said, hang on a second, honey. Whoever took her debit card is spending a lot less money than she was. Our son graduated from Clemson University, with a degree in philosophy. So he had the same decision to make that every philosophy undergraduate major has, which is, do I go to law school or do I go to work in the Chick-fil-A drive-thru window? And he opted for law school, so my wife and I are up in Virginia. He's off to the side of the stage. He's about to walk across the stage and take the diploma from the dean of the law school, and unbeknownst to his parents, he's having an epiphany that he does not want to be a lawyer. And I'm thinking, I guess it's kind of a father thing to be thinking, why you could not have that epiphany 3 years and $150,000 ago. But he did not, so he is doing what all philosophy undergraduate majors who went to law school but don't want to practice law are doing, which is living at home, playing golf on my membership at the Country Club of Spartanburg with my other friends who do not have jobs. It was before daylight savings changed. I've got 7 jobs. I count them for my kids on a regular basis, 7. Practice a little bit of law, writing a book, podcast, television show, teaching a class at Walford College, teaching a class at the law school. And so I'm coming in and it's dark. And my wife, we live in a fine neighborhood, but my wife's got every door locked and deadbolted. Honestly, you would think that we lived in Medellin, Colombia, or Chicago, or somewhere incredibly violent. So it's deadbolted, and I got stuff under both my hands, and I looked through the little glass window, and I know the kid saw me. I know he saw me. And so I'm fumbling, thinking, well, he's going to get up. He's sitting in a chair in front of the television. He's going to get up, but he does not get up. So everything falls out, and I unlock the door, and I walk in, and I don't say a word. I just look at him. And my wife says, could I see you in the kitchen for a moment? Sure, honey. She said, you have no idea the stress that he is under. Yeah, you're right, honey. I have absolutely no idea. No car payment, no mortgage payment, no cell phone payment, no student loans. I have no clue the stress that he is under, so please tell me about it. She said, well, the man on his video game died this afternoon, and he had to start all over again. So, aside from a lack of objectivity as it relates to her children, my wife is the kindest, sweetest, most Christ-like person that I have ever known or ever been around. She's a first-grade school teacher. Her life revolves around her 2 children and then the students in her classroom. And 2 dogs. I don't want to talk about religion. I don't believe in reincarnation. If I'm wrong, I have no interest in coming back as her husband, but I would like to come back. I would like to come back as her 3rd dog. They have amazing lives. She does not follow politics at all. Doesn't watch the news, doesn't read the newspaper. She's actually very happy too, but she doesn't do any of that. I think she knows where I was for those 8 years, but I've never pressed her on it. Her one flaw, and I hope and pray that y'all do not have this in Pennsylvania, but her one flaw is from about 8:45 to 9:45 every night. She'll sit down in the chair and watch something called the Hallmark Channel. Do y'all? Oh, dear Lord, help me. I don't want to ruin it for you if you're taping the movie tonight, but it's the exact same movie that you watched last night. It is a perfect man meets a perfect woman, overcomes an incredibly minor obstacle in life, and then lives happily ever after. So, sorry to ruin it, but you've seen it before. So, seeing Scott tonight and people do ask, do you miss it? I don't. You do miss kind of the excitement and the energy. Do y'all remember, I guess it's been a couple years ago, we were on the verge of going to war with Denmark or Norway or Iceland over Greenland? Do y'all remember that? There was this little conflict. Apparently we wanted to buy Greenland, and it, unbeknownst to us, it was not for sale, and that created some conflict. And that is one night I do vividly remember. I was nervous. My wife said, why are you nervous? You're too old to be called up if we go to war. I said, honey, I know that. I have to go on Fox. What if someone asked me to find these countries on the map? So I went to bed. I think it was the old comment that put me in a bad humor. I went to bed, and God's got a sense of humor. He said, well, you're not up there, but I'm going to send you a dream. And in your dream are going to be 3 colleagues that you used to work with. And I don't know if there's a psychiatrist here tonight, but if there is, I'm going to tell you my dream. You can kind of interpret it for me in the back right corner when we're done, and then we're going to talk about how to win. In my dream, and you can trust me, I'm a lawyer. 3 of my former colleagues, John Boehner, Marco Rubio, and Lindsey Graham, are all tragically killed when lightning struck a strip mall in Georgia where they were taking a hot yoga class. And good luck getting that image out of your mind, by the way. But lightning strikes, all 3 of them die, all 3 of them go to heaven, which could happen. 2 of them for sure. But in my dream, all 3 of them went, and they're greeted by St. Peter, and St. Peter says, look, you're big shots on earth, but there are rules in heaven, and you're either going to follow the rules or there are going to be consequences. And this literally should surprise absolutely no one. John Boehner was the first person to violate the rules of heaven. He broke into a Walgreens and stole some cigarettes and some self-tanning lotion. And in my dream, he is chained to Rosie O'Donnell with a 10-foot, this really happened, 10-foot long chain, and in a voice as loud as thunder, I hear, John Boehner, you violated the rules of heaven, and this is your punishment for all of eternity. And then I see Marco. Marco broke into Mary Magdalene's apartment and stole those elevator boots he wore in the Iowa caucuses to make himself look taller. And then on the way out of her apartment, he steals a case of San Pellegrino sparkling water in case he's ever asked to give the response to the State of the Union again. Come on, y'all remember that sip of water? Oh my heavens. But in any event, he's chained to Richard Simmons with a 5-foot long chain. And you hear in this voice as loud as thunder, Marco Rubio, you violated the rules of heaven, and this is your punishment for all of eternity. And this is where I get emotional, because I've known Lindsey for a long time. I've known Lindsey for 30 years. I've actually liked him for part of that time. Part of it. I play golf with Lindsey on Sunday afternoons. He'll drive over from the trailer that he lives in. It is after church for my son and me. There ain't no way in the world it's after church for Lindsey. It's just a normal Sunday afternoon, but he'll come over. And so he's grown on me over the course of these 30 years. And so it was emotional when I see him in my dream, and he is chained to the former supermodel Cindy Crawford with a 3-foot long chain. And in a voice as loud as thunder, I hear, Cindy Crawford, you have violated the rules of heaven. First thing I want to do is offer you a word of encouragement. It takes 0 courage to be a Republican in South Carolina. None. Both of our United States senators are Republican. Every single statewide constitutional office holder is a Republican. The state House is Republican. The state Senate is Republican. 6 of our 7 members of the U.S. House are Republican. There are so few Democrats in South Carolina, we have begun to fight among ourselves. It doesn't take any courage. Pennsylvania is different. If my math is right, you have a Republican senator in the U.S. Senate and a Democrat. Your House delegation, if my math is correct, is split down the middle, 9 and 9. As I did a little bit of research, I only saw one, like what I would consider to be constitutional office holder in Pennsylvania that's a Republican. So I want to encourage you to, number one, not become discouraged, not to become disillusioned, not to give up. What I want to do tonight is empower someone living in a 50-50 state to win. And look, there's a verse in the Bible, I think it's in Ecclesiastes. There's a time and a season for all things under the sun. There's a time to fight. Look, I've been married 32 years. I know that there is a time to fight. I got 3 sisters. There's a time to fight. There's a time to argue. But there's also a time to persuade. And we're living in a 50-50 country, and you're living in essentially a 50-50 state. So can you argue your way out of it? Can you fight your way out of it? Even if you can, wouldn't you like to equip yourselves to be able to persuade people that are open-minded that there is a better way? When I got to the House, we had the House, but we didn't have the Senate. We didn't have the White House. So we embarked on a journey to convince the American people that what we really need is the United States Senate. We got the House, we need the Senate, and the thinking was that we would pass bills in the House and then have them passed in the Senate, and they would go to the President Obama's desk, and he would veto it, and then that would show people contrast. And that's what you need in politics. You need contrast. So that was the thinking. And we went before the American people and said, give us the United States Senate so we can pass bills and send it to the President's desk. And you can see the contrast in the 2 political parties. I remember being on stage in North Carolina with Tim Scott, and we were extolling the crowd to please come out and vote. Please come out and vote. Tom Tillis was in a very, very close race. We're in Western North Carolina just extolling the crowd. Please get out and vote. It makes a difference. Never once did we tell the people, hey, we really need 60 votes in the Senate. 51 ain't going to do any good. We didn't tell them that. Never once did Tim or I say, you know what, there are a lot of factions within the Republican Party. We're going to have a hard time getting our act together. That ain't what we said. Give us the House and the Senate and see what we do. And lo and behold, the American people did it. They gave us the House and the Senate. But then we needed the White House. We got to control foreign policy, and we got to control Supreme Court nominations, and we need to control who picks the U.S. attorneys and the federal judges. Yes, we have the House. Yes, we have the Senate. Yes, that's what we told you we needed to be able to show you contrast. But what we really, really, really need is all 3. And then in 2016, the American people said, okay. So there we are. We had the House, we had the Senate, we had the presidency, all the gears of government, everything you need except an agenda. Everything you need except a set of deeply held convictions upon which you will govern. For the entire time I was there, our election philosophy was we need something we don't have, so give it to us. And you got to be careful doing that, because every now and again they'll give it to you, and then you got to do what you said you were going to do. And then the other part of our argument was we're not as bad as the other side. That may be true. That is hardly an inspiring agenda upon which to run, that the other side is worse than we are. So that got me thinking, what does it mean to be a conservative? What does that word mean? I mean, there's this flirtation now with populism. Populism to me is pretty easy. Find out what people believe, pay a pollster to confirm it, and repeat it back to them. That's populism. That's not hard. What do people believe? Give it back to them. Tell them what they want to hear, and you can have a long, successful career in politics. Now, you got to be nimble, because sometimes what the people want changes. Conservatism is much tougher. Conservatism does not tell people what they want to hear. Conservatism, every now and again, tells people what they need to hear, what they ought to hear. And that is a very different argument. I'm not a populist, but here I'm in good company. Neither were the framers. Remember, they didn't even trust us to elect our United States senators. They let your legislative bodies do that. They didn't give us a direct democracy. They gave us a republic. They gave us an electoral college. They were not populist. And neither am I. Conservatism. The art of telling people what they ought to hear. We have won, by my count, 1 out of the last 7 popular votes for the presidency. 1 out of 7. If that was your district attorney, you would fire her or him. If that were your cardiologist, you would be dead and you would have nothing to worry about. 1 out of 7. And yes, I am well acquainted with the reality that you do not need to win the popular vote to win the presidency. But there ain't no rule against it. Is there? I mean, is there anything that says you can't build a mandate that is big enough to win both? Is there anything that says, hey, you can't persuade enough of your fellow citizens that there really is a better way? So how do we do that? First thing I would ask you is, what do you believe and why do you believe it? Not just what do you believe, why do you believe it? There was a gentleman earlier tonight who won an award for his commitment to life. Is that one of the precepts of conservatism? Is that one of the fundamental principles of conservatism, respect for life? Why? Why? And can you explain it using literature and explain it using philosophy and explain it using something other than theology? Can you use the law? Can you use the foundational document for our country, the Constitution? Can you make the argument to people who need to be persuaded on the issue of life? How about limited government? You don't hear a lot about limited government anymore. That used to be, to me, what it was to be a conservative. I believe in a limited federal government. I mean, that's why we have enumerated powers. It enumerates what the federal government ought to do. But we have, in large measure, abandoned that argument. And we've abandoned it because it is tougher to make that sale to people. But if it is a deeply held conviction, if it is one of the fundamental planks of your platform, are you willing to try? Can you convince your fellow citizens that something is a wonderful idea? It's just not a wonderful idea for Congress. I will take a back seat to precisely no one on the issue of domestic violence. No one. I'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who spent more time in a courtroom in front of a jury on behalf of a victim who was killed by someone who claimed to love her. I will not cower in the face of anyone who wants to talk about domestic violence. Can you explain to the head of your local safe homes or your rape crisis center that you believe that that is one of the most fundamental issues in the state of Pennsylvania, but it is not for Congress. Can you make that argument? Tort reform. That used to be one of the fundamental precepts of conservatism, tort reform. Can you make the argument that that is a decision best made by the states? When I was there, they put a tort reform bill on the floor of the House. This is before Scotty got there. And so that afternoon, we are voting on tort reform, and that morning we had a hearing on the Judiciary Committee about how the federal government has no business getting involved in health care. How do you reconcile those two? I mean, be consistent. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? Personal responsibility, is that a precept? Is that a fundamental plank in the conservative platform? Personal responsibility. Do we believe it? Can we explain to young people who may not be accustomed to that phrase why we believe it? Respect for the rule of law. Can we explain it? I mean, when I say that in front of crowds of young people now, you know what they hear? He just likes locking people up. It is only when you begin to explain that the law is the most unifying, equalizing force that we have in our culture. It is the only thing that makes the richest person in Pennsylvania drive the same speed limit as the poorest person in Pennsylvania. There's a reason it is personified by a blindfolded woman. Can you make the argument? Accountability, what you owe others as a joint sojourner on this path, this republic. What do we owe our fellow citizens? Not to take things we're not entitled to, not to take things that we have not suffered a loss from. I watched with great interest both the elections in Georgia. This was after the 2020 election. Literally, the United States Senate was on the ballot in Georgia. Control of the United States Senate. I mean, we talk about it a lot. Hey, this election may determine who controls the House or the Senate. There ain't no question that election determined who controlled the United States Senate. You with me? All you got to do is win one of them. And I'm sitting in my little tiny home in South Carolina, and I hear that one of the great ideas we have is to take not just this amount and give it to everybody impacted by the pandemic, but to double it. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, that probably is smart politics, but I'd be doggone if I see the conservative foundation of that position. Conservatism will say if you've been impacted, you should be made whole. That's rooted in the Constitution. That's why we have a takings clause. If something's taken, you're entitled to just compensation. If you've lost nothing, then it's called a windfall. And that's not conservatism. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? If you want to break out of this 50-50, if you want to have 12 members of the House delegation, if you want both of the United States Senate seats, perhaps I am wrong. Perhaps there is this secret minority that is going to come out and vote and deliver the U.S. Senate, the House, the White House, all of that. I've been hearing that since I was a kid, that there's this silent group that's never been energized before. What in the world they're waiting on, I could not possibly tell you, but that's what I hear. I think that it's because we'd rather believe that than believe that we need to roll up our sleeves and actually convince people that there is a better way. That is hard. But it is the only way to effectuate long-term change. So, on the way home tonight, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? And can you explain it to someone in a winsome, persuasive way? Number two, and this is where I feel liberated being out of politics, because I can say exactly what I think. Not that I didn't do it when I was there, but it is liberating now. I want us to have a family conversation about the manner in which we communicate. I spent nearly 2 decades standing in front of 12 people who could not get out of jury service. You know it's true. I know it's true. Couldn't get out of jury service, which means I didn't know them. I couldn't know them. If I knew them, they wouldn't be on the jury. You had to convince them by the highest evidentiary burden our culture recognizes, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. And you got to get all 12. In politics, if you get 7 out of 12, they start talking about putting you on that monument in South Dakota. 7 out of 12 ain't good in a courtroom. All 12 beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to persuade people that you don't know. In some instances, to take another life in a capital case. Are you persuasive? Do you use facts? And are they really facts? And have you fully investigated the other side of the argument and anticipate every argument that can be made against you? And do you have a counter for it? Do you traffic in facts? Are you sincere? Are you authentic? Are you genuine? Do you actually live out the things that you are advocating for and proposing for others? This is where I love the concept of personal responsibility. It is really hard to persuade someone that personal responsibility is necessary in a thriving republic if we don't practice it ourselves. Persuasion is not magic. It is some kind of a relationship with the person that you are talking to. It is a willingness to listen, which has the ancillary benefit of allowing you to find the weakness in whatever it is they believe. Are you fully conversant in whatever the issue is that you want to discuss, whether it's XM Bank, whether it is student loans and interest rates? Are you conversant? That's what works. Marrying passion with logic, with facts, and having the person with whom you're communicating believe that you actually care about what they decide. Ratifying what people already believe requires no talent at all. Nothing. If you want to see if you're good, see if you can persuade someone that maybe isn't quite there. What doesn't work? Insults don't work. It's great if you want to go to an event where everybody already agrees with you. You can for sure get applause lines and you can get laughter. But it's not persuasive. And anyone who's been married more than 30 minutes knows that. Insults don't persuade. What it does is it makes the person say, I will go to my grave never admitting that you are right. Hypocrisy doesn't work. If you're in a 50-50 state, if you're in a 50-50 county, if you're in a 50-50 country, someone's going to have to get good at convincing the convincible. And I am not talking about showing up at the squad's office in Washington and trying to convince them to embrace a tax cut. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about people in your sphere of influence, whether it be work, family, church, persuading them that there is another way, a better way. So we know we have to know what we believe and why we believe it. I think if we were being honest with ourselves, we would say that we probably could stand to have a more multifactorial way of communicating. I love talking to people that have not made up their minds. I even enjoy talking to people that do not agree with me. And what I like about it is not only the challenge, it also helps me sharpen what I do believe. But I like to see if I can communicate conservatism, which has a bad rap, and inject them with this word that was commandeered in 2008, unjustly commandeered by President Obama, the word hope. Do we communicate hope in those with whom we're talking? The folks that waited on us tonight, if they got home and someone asked, what was the crowd like? Did they have a sense that we have the sense that they have the same hopes and dreams as our own kids and our own grandkids? Do we communicate that to the people that we come in contact with? That we understand you have aspirations. We understand you want to do this or that. Do we communicate hopefulness? It's no secret to anybody, Tim Scott was my best friend in politics. He will preach my funeral, primarily because he's willing to make stuff up and talk for a long time. And those are the only two real requirements that I have for preaching my funeral. But he sent me something that he'd been working on conservatism, what it means to him. There's not a negative word in that entire document. There's not a don't do this and don't be that. It is the narrative, the life story, the personal testimony of a man who went from where he started in life to the United States Senate based on what we believe, conservative principles. Not a negative word in it. Aspirational, hopeful. Can we do that? Do we do that? I don't want to dwell on that word, but if you are trying to connect with people that are unmoved, unpersuaded, it's okay if they like you. It's okay if they think you get where they're trying to get. My wife made me go to a funeral with her, not a funeral, a wedding. I didn't even mean that. I do not equate the two always. I guess I should, not that she made me. We were going, where did this tradition get started that you get married on Saturdays? Because I can tell you, if you get married in the fall on a Saturday, there's a bunch of other stuff going on. And it's important stuff, like the SEC game of the week. And yes, there are 11 or 12 other games, but not this one game. That's only one time. So I told my wife I wasn't going, not going to the wedding. And she said, no, you go get your behind in the truck. You're going to your sister's wedding. So I went. I wasn't at all happy about it. There's only one little bit of drama in any wedding in South Carolina, and I'm just literally sitting on the edge of the church pew, just in rapt attention at whether or not the couple will use the unity candle or pour the sand together, because that is the only drama that I have ever seen in a wedding. And how miserable the mother-in-law to be looks. There's a little bit of drama there also. But you can't go to a wedding without hearing one verse. I've tried. You can't escape it. These three things remain: faith, hope, and love. Love wins. I get it. Do you ever think about how powerful hope must be to even be mentioned in the same sentence? Three things. Only three things remain: faith, hope, and love. Do we communicate in hopeful terms? Do we model for others what we believe? Tim and I ate dinner. I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but I would not be surprised if it was not every night that we were both together. We came in as freshmen. We were together for 8 years. We made a commitment to one another that we are going to kind of have a personal check-in. And that was usually at dinner time. It was my only dinner of the day. I don't swear that it was only his only dinner of the day. But we got together and kind of, usually we didn't even talk about politics. Just kind of what's going on in life, talked a lot about sports. But there was this one night, we were kind of reflecting on growing up in South Carolina. We're almost exactly the same age. And he was telling me about growing up in a single-parent household with his mom and his brother, and they shared a bedroom. They shared one room. And then for a period of time, his grandfather, Mr. Artemus Ware, also lived there. And Tim was recounting for me that Mr. Ware would have the Charleston Post and Courier up every morning at breakfast so he could imprint in Tim's mind to value education. You have to be knowledgeable about what's going on in the world, grandson. You got to be up on civics. You got to be up on current events. And the only way to do that is to stay educated. So he would hold the Charleston Post and Courier up, modeling for this young Tim Scott the power of education, the life-changing, magical properties of education. And I thought, you know, Tim, that's so neat. We have that in common also. My dad did the same thing, different newspaper, different part of the state. You know, my three sisters and I were sitting there at the breakfast table. My dad had the Spartanburg Herald Journal up, and if one of my sisters would deign to ask him a question, he would lower it and answer it, and then it went right back up. Isn't that neat, Tim? We got that in common. And he hung his head and said, the difference, Trey, is my grandfather could not read. He died at the age of 94. Never learning to read or write. He picked cotton. And when picking cotton is the ceiling for your life, why bother? But he faked it. He faked it because he wanted to inspire a young man to access the education he never had a chance to access. And that man that picked cotton for a living had a grandson that picked out a seat in the United States House of Representatives and then a seat in the United States Senate. And that man that could not read or write raised a grandson that is writing significant bills and legislation and has written a New York Times bestseller. That is the power of hope if we can communicate that to others. So we know we have to be convinced in what we believe and what we know to be true, and we have to explain to people why, and we need to be mindful of the manner in which we communicate. And now we only need one more thing. We got to have somebody deliver the message. And my guess is at least some of you are sitting there thinking, well, you know, Trey, I'm not running for office. You were in the House. That was your job. Perry's in the House. That's his job. I'm not running for the Senate, and I'm not running for governor. I'm not on the Supreme Court. Yeah, somebody's got to deliver the message. But it ain't me. I didn't sign up for that. I don't want to be on city council. I don't want to be on county council. I'm not running for district attorney. Always waiting on somebody else to be the change that you think needs to occur. Somebody else's job. If only the Speaker of the House did this. If only the chairman of the Judiciary Committee did that. If only the Supreme Court. If only the mayor. If only county council. If only someone else did something else. Then everything would be fine. I get it. I get it. You want to be overwhelmed with your own sense of inadequacy? You want to be overwhelmed by your own perceived small space in the universe? Work in Washington. Fly into an airport named for Reagan, into a city named for Washington. Look at the monuments and memorials to Jefferson and Lincoln and King. And then when you get on the Capitol grounds, every building is named for someone famous, and every room within the building is named for someone famous. And you see these monuments of the past and these famous names that we learned about in history class, and we are overwhelmed with our own sense of inadequacy. So yes, I do get this temptation to let somebody else be the messenger. Yeah, we got to communicate better, but that's not me. I'm not running for office. That's somebody else. Scott Perry's got to do a better job. Pat Toomey's got to do a better job. The candidates need to do a better job. I get it. Been there myself. Flying into Washington, you just have this overwhelming sense of your own inadequacy. When you are looking out the left-hand side of the plane and seeing all the monuments and markers of our illustrious history. I get it. But eventually, even a guy that was educated in South Carolina figures out there are two sides to the plane. I don't have to look at the reminders of my own mortality, my own insignificance. I don't have to look at that. I'm never going to have anything named after me. I'm going to look out the right-hand side of the plane as that pilot begins to descend and you are hovering over the Potomac and you see these elegant white crosses punctuating these rolling green hills, and it is the most tragically beautiful sight that you have ever seen. It is so tragically beautiful, the symmetry, the contrast. This place we call Arlington. So my question to you is, who built this country? The handful of names you know, or the men and women who found something bigger than themselves that they wanted to serve and sacrifice for? Who built the country? Who perfected the country? Who defended the country? Who was on this mission to perfect this union? The handful of names that you know, or the scores and scores of women and men who do not have an office in front of or behind their name. They just found something bigger than themselves and worth serving and sacrificing for. So if you are like me, and you cannot relate to that side of the plane, but you can relate to average, everyday Americans who just found something, then you know who the messenger is. It is you. And whether you ever run for anything or not, you know who you have influence over, and you know who is in your orbit, and you know who is in your family, and you know who is at your place of business. So you need to be the change that you are wishing for and hoping for. Do not be overwhelmed. The greatest experiment in self-governance the world will ever know was built by women and men just like you. Can you find it? Can you find something worth serving? and then go convince others that there is a better way. God bless you. God bless the state of Pennsylvania, and thank you again for coming tonight.